here, so folks are aware of that. So we'll put a link to this recording into the notes document, and we'll distribute that afterward for folks who can't join. And I'll just do a minute of introduction here to give folks maybe one more minute to join in. If you haven't, it'd be great if you could add your name to the attendance list on the document I've just pasted into the chat. We just find it really valuable to see where folks are coming from and what institutions they're with, if that's relevant. So I should start by saying welcome to the IIIF community call. Thank you all for joining us. You know, I'll also say I hope you're all staying inside, staying safe, taking care of yourselves. Our topic today, this is a regular call if you're joining us for the first time. The IIIF community does calls like this every 2 weeks. We often alternate between kind of more technical calls and more general community calls. So this is a regularly scheduled call. We usually do them on Wednesdays. We decided to take the opportunity to use this call to do a topic that we've seen people asking a lot of questions about and that we've covered in a couple of different ways in IIIF events before. And that's the topic of teaching and learning with IIIF, or teaching and learning kind of with digital resources in general, and in these cases with IIIF. So we have a couple of presentations here today. We have Mario Einaudi, who's going to take us through some examples of that he gave at our Ann Arbor showcase meeting in the fall. And then we have Laura Morreale, who's going to talk us through some examples of using IIIF and a tool from the page to do transcriptions and other work with in a classroom and learning setting. So those are the two examples we have today, but I think just by the attendance, it seems like this is a timely topic and useful to many of you. So we have another call in 2 weeks, and if there are other folks who want to do a demo or have something that they'd like to suggest, we're totally open to shaping the next community call to cover the same or a similar topic. So by all means, get in touch with us. We're happy to craft that as is useful to folks in the community. So that's the gist of our agenda today. Maybe before we dive too deeply into it, could I ask someone to help us take some notes? Is there anybody who'd be willing to volunteer in that open notes document? This is always the longest pause on the IIIF community calls.
Hi, I'm happy to take notes. I have to go to another meeting at 1, so if we run a little over, someone might need to take over.
That's tremendous. Thank you very much. And that's we promise that right up to 1 is just fine, because I know a bunch of people probably have to scoot. So so we'll keep this timely here. Thank you. And of course, others, it's an open document. So if others want to join in and paste a link or whatever that may be, you're welcome to do that. We often do introductions, but just looking at the numbers here, I'm not sure we're going to do that today, just in the interest of time, not because I don't want to know who all you are and what your interest is, but just so we can get through the demos. We'll pause on that, or we'll postpone that. But really great to have you here, and welcome if you're just joining us to the IIIF community call. Really excellent to have you with us today. So we also, so just some general announcements and updates. I'll cover a few just from the IIIF staff side, and then if there are any others, please jump in and let us know. So the main event to mention, or the main announcement, is that, oh, that's a lovely idea. Yes, thank you. The Brumfield suggests introducing yourselves through the chat if you'd like to do that, by all means. So while that's happening, I'll say that we had to postpone the annual IIIF conference that was scheduled to happen June 1 to 4, and it was going to take place in Cambridge. We are still hoping to eventually, when it is safe and possible to do so, we will hold an event in Boston or in Cambridge. But we basically can't usefully tell you when that'll happen, whether it would be later this fall or it would have to wait till next spring. So we're kind of in a wait and see mode on the annual conference. In lieu of that, or really taking place the same week, what we're working on is some virtual programming. So it's not meant to take the entire replacement angle of the annual conference, but we're doing some virtual programming that same week of June 1 to 4, coming up in just a few months. And we'll send out much more concrete info about this to the IIIF Discuss email list, and we'll post about it on Twitter and elsewhere. But just to give you a sense of what we're thinking right now, we're going to have a number of basically 1-hour events spread out over the week and geared toward different topics and different parts of the IIIF community. We're going to plan some programming for, say, the UK and Europe focused at a convenient time for them, some programming for the US, an hour that's more convenient for our Japanese partners and contributors in the IIIF community. And then we're also going to welcome our community groups. So there are a number of groups within the community focused on topic areas like manuscripts and archives, as well as things like maps and audio and visual materials. So we're going to invite our community group chairs to also host events within that week, kind of community calls like this during that week to showcase and focus on topics of interest that they might want to showcase. So hopefully over that course of that week, there's kind of a really rich program of topics and programming that would be of interest to a lot of folks, and we'll record all of that so that anyone who can't join, or say it's at a time zone in the middle of the night wherever you are, we'll record all of it so that we can make it available later. So that's coming together pretty quickly. I would say look out in the next couple of weeks for more concrete info on exactly how that'll work and a published schedule and things like that. All right. Those are the main announcements from the IIIF staff side. Is there anything else anyone would like to announce or mention or bring to the attention of the folks gathered here today? Maybe the second longest pause on community calls. All right, I don't hear anyone jumping in. Hopefully everyone can unmute themselves. Maybe that's maybe I didn't think about that. I think you all have the power to jump in and unmute. Yeah, I see a few folks doing it. Great. Also, feel free to add in anything into the notes document or links if that's how you'd like to do it. No problem there. So I'll pause maybe just one more second if there's any questions on the conference front or any other announcements, but otherwise we'll move on to our agenda. Any questions or thoughts here? Okay. Well, great. In that case, what we will do is we'll turn it over to the two kind of brief demo presentations that we have today. And I think that'll take us a good chunk of the way through the hour, but then I think we will have a good amount of time for some questions and discussion after that. So we'll take it away. So Mario, are you ready and willing to go first here?
I am ready to go.
Here. All right.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen with everyone. Good morning. My name is Mario Einaudi. I'm the Digital Repository Manager at the Huntington. I'm coming to you from the wilds of California, specifically Los Angeles. Let me get to my PowerPoint. There we go. Everyone can see my PowerPoint? Excellent. All right, so as Josh mentioned, this was a talk that I gave at Ann Arbor. It's also a talk that I've given a couple of other times. And the first time I gave it was actually in June of last year, and it was to a group of teachers the Huntington had called together. The Huntington has a very active and robust education department, and they work very closely with teachers in the Los Angeles area. And one of the things that they've hosted in the past were summer institutes for teachers to learn about Huntington collections, Huntington materials, how to use them, not just from the library, but from the art and from the botanical divisions. So this is a presentation that I gave to the teachers to teach them about the Huntington Digital Library, what it is, what we have in it, and then how they can use it to present something that I thought was really fun and new. And actually the response from the teachers said they thought it was fun and new. And that was use of Mirador. We use Content DM for our digital library. And as you all, or most of you probably know, they are now IIIF compliant and they have Mirador built in. So that gave us a really strong tool with the teachers. So I'm going to run through my slide deck to show you what I've shown the teachers and give you a sense of what the digital library is. Our digital library has a large number of photographs. More than 160,000 photographs have been scanned. We have about 603 rare books and broadsides online, and we're adding more regularly. Actually, we've just added probably about 30 incunabula to medical history in the last month. We have over 7,400 maps and atlases. Some really fantastic examples, including the one from the center is from the French and Indian Wars, the early or the mid 1700s. A lot of these are hand-drawn, and they're setting up new forts in various places, including Canada. We have over 2,364 manuscripts, a total of 34,000 pages. A lot of these are letters, but we have also drawings and reports from people traveling across the United States during the gold rush years. We have 6,604 prints and ephemera. Prints and ephemera are really an exciting group of materials, as you probably all know. They contain a lot of social history, and they can be really, really fun and visual, especially for students. And because it is our digital library, we have images and objects from our own institution, including that handsome picture of Henry Huntington on the far left, looking off into the future. And on the far right, we have Hertrick, who was his chief gardener and then head of botanical services. He actually was with Henry from basically 1916 to 1966. I should say he was at Huntington until 1966. He lived on the grounds until then and then passed away. And the two women in the center are our manuscript catalogers from the 1930s, and their names are Norma Cuthbert and Heidi Noya. And the interesting thing is there's been a recent blog post on Heidi Noya. She is the one in the dark dress standing up. She was multilingual. She was from Puerto Rico. She came to the Huntington, and like many staff members, she stayed on into the 1960s and then retired. So pretty amazing young lady there. So that's a quick rundown, very quick, of the Huntington Digital Library. It's as I said to the teachers, it's a tool to use and to explore. And there's our address, hdl.huntington.org. HDL like the good cholesterol, for all of us who are thinking about medical terms these days. And the image here is actually of General Haupt, and that's how he got across the Potomac River between Alexandria and Washington, D.C. That's the Potomac during the Civil War. An amazing fellow, and he was one who loved to use tools, and he probably dived right into our digital library. So the focus of this talk is about teachers and their students and how they can use Mirador in education. So what I chose for my talk with the teachers, because California, especially here in Los Angeles, there's been a lot of talk about use of land, use of spaces, where we are, who was there beforehand, context and connections. So I chose to show context and connections. Union Station. Union Station celebrated its 80th anniversary last year. Union Station, of course, is the main rail hub for Los Angeles. Interestingly, it was not built until 1938, 39, and there had not been a unified place for Los Angeles prior to that. But what was at Union Station beforehand? It takes up a huge amount of space, not only the building itself, but also the rail yards. So what was there before? Because Los Angeles, it's in downtown Los Angeles. It's next to the plaza, which is the original home of Los Angeles. It's the original Mexican settlement. So it's clearly took up something. So what was there before? What was there before was Chinatown. This is actually the second Chinatown that was developed in Los Angeles. It was built starting in the 1880s, following a fire in the late 1870s, early 1880s, on land that was donated, or not donated, but sold to Chinese merchants by a gentleman named Plaza. So we can show that through the original tract map, which we have, the Plaza tract. We can show that development of downtown Los Angeles with the Plaza tract from the 1890s in this map. We can show it in this map from 1904, showing the Plaza tract, how it's expanded. And you can see its relationship clearly to the plaza, the little blue circle. And again, we can show the development in this map from the 1920s. And this map shows how Chinatown itself has now become a block. And the interesting thing is, over time, city leaders saw Chinatown as someplace dangerous and not a place for people to go. So the maps post 1914 began showing Chinatown solely as a block. There were no streets in there. It was not seen as a place that you would go to and see. So teachers can show maps and development like this, or they can see, go onto our HDL and find photographs of Chinatown as seen from a survey that was done shortly before Chinatown was torn down. This is Marchesalt Street on the left. Or you can see pictures taken by visitors. In this case, this is a picture of Chinatown taken by Maynard Parker. We have a large collection of his material, about 60,000 negatives from Maynard Parker, of which we've scanned about 13,000, primarily of homes in the mid-century. So if you have mid-century tastes and interests, I suggest you go to Maynard Parker collection and take a look at it. It's a fantastic collection, and we're slowly adding to it. But these are all static images. And what if you wanted to tell a story that was a little more dynamic? Something that you could actually have the students, rather than looking at a slide deck, use, do something interactive. So that's where Mirador comes in. And as a teacher, you can tell your students, because many classrooms now have Chromebooks, they have other devices that one can use, and you can have the students follow along with you. You can give them a list of links that they can place into their Chromebook if you want to do that, or you could teach them how to do searches in the Huntington Digital Library. In terms of time saving today, I'm going to just go through with links that I've already established. So I'm going to bring up the map of 1904 Los Angeles, the one that showed the streets nicely laid out. This is our digital record. You can see we have a lot of metadata relating to it, which gives the students information, including physical coordinates. But what's important, and what I point out to the teacher, is Mirador. So we actually have a button where you can link straight to Mirador. And now you can see, I mean, all of you are familiar with Mirador and you can use Mirador, but as I said to the teachers, you can see now the map and because we usually scan both sides, you can see both sides of the map down here. If you look on the back side of this map, just a quick aside, this is kind of fun. See H-E-H. This was actually, those are Henry E. Huntington. Those are his initials. This was the map that he used when reviewing his land development and his railroads. Most of the rail system that you see here in yellow, as well as in red, actually was owned by Henry Huntington. He was developing the mass transit system of Los Angeles. So if you scroll down here and focus in, there is Chinatown. So as a teacher, you can be showing Chinatown and its various ancillary areas and its relationship to the rest of the city. Okay, that's one map. One of the things that you can do, if you add your slot to the left and you go out and we get the map of the plot, because we worked with Content DM and OCLC, one of the things that I asked for, and now they're adding to other collections, is that the IIIF manifest actually be posted at the bottom of all the records. So it would be an easy thing for a teacher to copy. And we'll go back to the Mirador. And we add the item. And now you can have a Poblasa track next to it. Now this is an older scan. This was done about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, which is why we haven't the verso of it. But there's the Poblasa tract. And this is the original tract, map of the Poblasa tract, as laid out in 1880, I think it was 3, correct? 88. And you can see here are the 3 blocks, the same 3 blocks that you can see here. As you can see, the town expanded outward, but there are the same streets, Poblasa, and you notice that one street isn't listed, but it's right here. To give more context, you can add a slot to the right, and again, I have it prepared. Let's just grab this, an image of Chinatown. I thank you all for your forbearance as I do this, but so I show the teachers. And now you can see images of Chinatown showing the same areas that you were looking at. This building here is this corner here where this A is. So now you have a context for the students as well. They can show the buildings, they can go and look for photographs of Chinatown and place them on the map, and they can look at it as it was developed in 1888. So this is 1888, this is 1904, and this is the 1930s. You actually have a nice sort of cross-section of time as well. So that's kind of fun. That's a neat way of giving students an idea of how to use Mirador to compare and then also link materials. As I said, again, the students can use this also to see Chinatown relationship to the rest of the city. You could also theoretically, not theoretically, I've suggested this and I think some teachers did this, you can show 2 different maps or 3 different maps of Los Angeles, because we have a number of these railroad maps that Henry had over time, and you can see how these railroad lines expanded as the city grew, or you can also see the development of areas on the outer edges of Los Angeles, because 1904 Los Angeles was not very big. This was Los Angeles, 1904. Much, much smaller than it is today. So that's what I have for today. I hope that everyone has found this interesting. If you would like, you can reach out to me at Einaudi@huntington.org. And I thank you for this opportunity to share this with you. I'm going to stop my share now, and I'm going to hand this over, I believe, to Laura. Is that correct, Josh?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Mario. That's just, that's the second time I've seen it, and it's still as great as ever. Just fascinating to see. I mean, I love old maps, and I think something like 85% of the population loves old maps. So a really great example, but also really great to see how teachers might do something similar with a variety of different collections. I think we have a few minutes. Maybe we'll pause just to see if there's any quick questions for Mario. Then we can hand it over to Laura, and we have time for questions later if people want to formulate things a little bit longer. But any initial questions for Mario?
Hi, Mario.
Question. Oh, go ahead. I'll go after you.
Okay. I was just wondering, do you have you seen teachers use this tool with other collections, like maps or images from other collections, or because I could definitely see that potential.
I myself not seen teachers use it because I'm the digital repository manager and I leave that over to our education department. Anecdotally, I've heard that they have used it from our education department. The exciting thing is our education department saw this and have heard back from the teachers, and they are building currently a separate website that will be IIIF-compliant to use Mirador in the same way, using prepackaged links and subject areas. So they got a good feedback from teachers, and I'm sure that teachers are using it, enough so that they're putting resources and money into building a site built around this. I'm not sure who they've contacted to do that, but they've been talking to me about subject areas that I think might work for this. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
And my question was basically the same thing, actually, which was so one of the great promises, of course, of IIIF is you can be bringing in across repositories and across institutions. And if you had experimented with that, and I think you pointing out that the IIIF manifest is sort of surfaced in that interface for your collection is really important, because it's not always easy to find depending on repositories, which makes it much more difficult when you're working with instructors to be like, oh, if you're using the Rumsey map collection, you need to go here to find the IIIF manifest. If you're using Harvard's collections, you need to go here to find it. Mm-hmm. So that's something to keep in mind as we sort of think about these interfaces too, is that promise of having cross-institutional material brought in to Mirador especially does depend somewhat on making those manifests easy to find.
Right, exactly. And that's one of the reasons why I pushed for it with OCLC and Content DM, was because I was thinking this would be a great tool for teachers, and how do they find it? It's not intuitive. And if you can make things as simple as possible for teachers, then it will work much better.
Absolutely. And I'll just jump in to say, like, this is really front of mind for us. And so there's some work in the community side working on the discovery elements of this, how we might be able to do cross-repository search. That's not quite done yet, but I just threw a link in the chat to point to a document that we are working on that is closely connected to the topic of this. But basically, we wanted to gather together resources to make it as easy as possible for people to do useful, interesting things. And so in particular, we've highlighted a list of collections that do make that link to IIIF manifests front and center. So that's not true of every institution, and that's fine. Some institutions aren't really geared towards, taking a resource and using it in a comparative tool. But all the ones that we've listed here, in one way or another, really do try to make that easy and make this kind of comparative analysis a little bit more straightforward. These are great. So maybe we'll go to Laura next, but continue the discussion after this. And I think this will all kind of be of a piece. So I think we're in good shape here. Laura, are you set to share your screen?
Here I am. Yeah, let me share the screen just 1 second. That is what I want. Share screen. All right, I hope you're all seeing that. My name is Laura Morreale. I'm an independent scholar here in Washington, D.C. I work at and with a lot of the universities in the area, so my affiliation tends to change on a semester basis. But anyway, so the talk I'm going to give today is about using transcription in the classroom. The example that I'm going to be using comes from a class I taught last spring at the Catholic University of America. As you can see, it's a 14th century Chronicle of Pisa. It looks really scary to a lot of people when they first see it. But the platform that I always use for transcription is FromThePage. I'm going to try not to be too much of an advertisement for FromThePage today, but in fact, working with IIIF and FromThePage is so very easy. You simply grab the manifest and stick it into the platform, and the text will show up, or the document will show up. I mean, it's so easy. I have my 9-year-old doing it. So, you know, at this time of finding things to do. But anyway, the point is that that platform really facilitates the kind of teaching that I do when I do transcriptions. And I'm going to start by saying that this is not a one-shot assignment. This tends to be an assignment that is rather lengthy. The transcription that we did in this particular class probably took about 6 weeks. So it's a multi-step process. But I'm just going to talk a little bit about why transcription is so great in the classroom. The first thing that I feel about it is that when you pull in original primary source documents for students to work on, it's an absolutely unmediated exercise. In other words, it's not something that I dreamt up for them to do. It's actually working with this materials. And I never do a document that I've already transcribed. I will always do a document that we are working on together. Because I want students to understand that, you know, they're sitting at the grown-up table, right, where they're doing the real work that needs to be done, that historians do, and literary scholars, or whatever sort of humanities scholar you are. They're doing the real work that we all do. It also encourages an extraordinarily deep engagement with the material. When you're working sort of word by word, or even stroke by stroke with a transcription, that requires students to really dig in and to understand what the documents are that they're dealing with. Since it's a group project, it breaks down that student instructor hierarchy, creates this textual community. I'll talk a little bit later about how it encourages critical thinking, but certainly it does allow that real connection to the past when you're working with a document that another person has created, or another group of people have created. There's that really personal element, and it's great for students to feel connected in that way. So when you first say to students, all right, we're going to be doing this transcription, this is what you'll hear. I don't know how to do this. I can't understand what this is. This text is way too long. Forget it. We're never going to get it done. But I encourage you just to assure the students that, yeah, it's difficult when you first start off. The metaphor that I've been using recently is that when you first confront a document, it's like meeting a new person. You have to kind of understand what that person's personal quirks are. How is this person approaching the story that he or she is wanting to tell, right? And so we all have sets of skills to deal with that. And we just have to sort of work through that initial awkward meeting of that person. So I'm just going to go through step by step how I structure the assignments. The first thing to do is to tell students, no matter how many students you have in this class, this is a relatively small class that I was working with, I'm going to give you a really small selection of text. In this case, it was about 20 lines. And you're going to have to tell students, this is going to be the most difficult transcription section or selection that you do, right? Because you're just trying to understand and get your bearings within the context of this document. And so what I'll say to them is, listen, I want you to do your 20 lines, but you need to get these 20 lines back to me a day before our next class meeting. Now, of course, we can do this in a real classroom, but also virtually the next time you all come together. right? So in this case, Nick Brown did his 20 lines, and you can see, and this is another way that the platform does great things, you can see my correction of that text, right? And he'll be able to see that immediately too, right? So he'll be learning what he did wrong or what didn't match up, right, as I'm making those corrections. So it's a really great tool to use in that way. After we've had all the students do their small selection, we'll come to our kind of meeting, our meeting together, and really talk about, you know, what is this document like? What, you know, how does he make his R's? What are the keys in this particular text to help us unlock it? You know, what are the abbreviations are used? How are we going to be expanding those or not? How does he deal with a line break or a section break? What kinds of, you know, punctuation is being used here? And then the most important thing is to come to some sort of list of the unresolved problems. And once again, this is a great sort of pedagogical tool, right? Because when you say to the students, I have no idea what that means, it makes them feel really empowered in some way that, you know, you're the instructor and you have an idea, but let's figure this out together. And once you have figured out what those unresolved questions are, you can then send them to the tools that they might be able to use to help unravel those problems, right? Here on the right side of the screen, you can see some of the tools that we used for this particular project. There are some 13th century Italian encyclopedias. There's some resources for paleography. There's one that's really subject-based, but perhaps has to do with the Encyclopedia of Medieval Chronicle. But at the end of the day, you can also say, listen, just Google it. Like, throw it out into the internet and see what comes back to you. And this is where we have this critical thinking component, right? Because they might throw something out there and get something crazy back, and, you know, stick it into the transcription, and it may work, right? But they need to stop then and say, okay, is this resource a respectable one or an authoritative one? And even if it's not, does it still work within the context of our problem here, right? So I think it really engages students on that level to try to think about what they're doing when they're solving this problem. And of course, the other thing that I tell them is, there's no cheating. Like, you can use anything that's out there. You can look on other people's work. I want you to look at your peers' work. I want you to look at the work that I've already done on this. Look, use whatever tools you have out there, because we're trying to solve a problem, right? And that's, I think, once again, quite liberating in terms of pedagogy. Now, once we've all, you know, dipped our toe in, done our sort of 20 lines, had our group meeting where we talk about, you know, who is this person and how does this person function within the context of this text, then we'll go ahead and break up the larger text. This one happened to be about 35 folios. We'll assign each student a range of pages to look at. And here we have this transcription log, which I think is a really great tool, you know, where they are in the process. But of course, the most important thing is that not only the students transcribe, but that there's a reviewer for that same page, right? And what that does is, once again, brings in this peer-to-peer teaching. So if, and once again, I'll say, I will always do a page, right? I will always be part of this process. I think it's helpful for the students, but I'll have a student review my work, because I make errors and I want them to see me making errors, right? But also because they're learning along the way, right? They're learning from the people that they're reviewing, you know, the work that they're reviewing as well. So it all feeds into this larger project. And once again, we always want to leave that space, leave that column for unresolved issues that the group can come back to afterwards and address. Or that, you know, maybe you're transcribing and you see that problem and you're like, oh, I already solved that. That's a name. I know it's weird, but that's a name. And that person can reach out and resolve that question within the context of the group. Now, one last thing is, after we've all gotten our rhythm and we know what we're doing, and even along the way, we need to talk about what our final product is going to look like. What are we creating when we do this transcription? Is it a diplomatic edition? Is it a critical edition? How do we deal with some of the weird things that come up, Arabic and Roman numerals, headings, rubrics, all this kind of stuff, right? And I think what's great about this exercise is that it makes students really aware of the editorial decisions that are made in the text that they normally read, right? In the printed text that they make, or that they read, and that someone is actually making those decisions. So while we are making our decisions about this, this particular edition, they're coming to terms with how they normally interact with other kinds of information. I'm not going to go through all of this because it would take too much time, but I'm just going, these are just some of the reactions that you get as you go through the process and some of the thoughts, I think, that come out. And I'll just say that the last one is really the most important one, is usually by the end of the transcription, they'll say, oh, I really hate this guy, or I love this guy and his stuff was great, but you know, he's just so annoying when he makes his S's like that, right? And so you really have that process that brings out a lot of different questions and an appreciation for the human who created this thing so long ago. And then of course, after you've got your edition, you can use it in any particular way you'd like to. In this particular case, we were able to collate our version of the text with a version that had been printed in the 18th century. It was a completely different version, and we were able to find the names of 24 victims of a flood, right, who died in the 14th century. And the students were really excited about that, really excited that they could then contribute that back to the conversation about this particular text. And so that's how I tend to structure these assignments, and I'm happy to talk to anybody about how it works or problems they might encounter along the way. So, thanks.
Thank you, Laura. That's really great. I think my favorite piece of that is the notion of developing a love-hate relationship with someone across 6 centuries. I think if IIIF can help with that, I think that's a lovely thought. So I think we're doing good on time. Are there questions, I guess, either for Mario or Laura at this point that folks want to have answered here?
Nobody jumps in just yet. This is Sara Brumfield with FromThePage. It was interesting when watching this to think about how other instructors use transcription in the classroom, because they've all kind of come to the same process independently. So we have a colleague at University of Texas who uses it in an undergraduate research methodology class. And he starts by sending the students into the archive, has them take a selfie with the original document. Maybe we can't do that these days, but it's a really neat idea to kind of get students comfortable going into the archive. And then he does, very similar to what Laura does, unlocks a single page for each student to transcribe. Then he pairs them up and has them review transcriptions that each other have done. And then after they've done that, he unlocks again and that's just giving them access to a private collection, a full set of transcribed letters. These are actually from the history of the university, negotiations to try to buy Troy. Texas did not buy Troy, but they thought about it, and have them write a research paper about it. And, you know, it's a very different group of students because they're much younger. And for them, you know, what a letter looks like. Dear so-and-so, sincerely so-and-so, that's actually new for some of them. The guy's handwriting was horrible and they're not very comfortable with cursive. So there's a lot of these barriers that they have the same challenges and complaints going through the process.
Other questions that folks have at the moment? Well, maybe as people formulate the questions, because I know they're out there, but maybe Sara, I could just call on you again, because I know there are folks here. So this has been great for like a really kind of educator facing setup, but I know there are a few folks on the call too who are maybe interested in examples that you've seen for like staff facing projects, which aren't radically different, you know, maybe have a different pedagogical context, but like maybe if you have a few anecdotes of how that's kind of formulated in the last few weeks and kind of a quick pivot in a lot of institutions.
It's still moving.
So we are a crowdsourcing platform. The majority of our projects are public facing and have been for the last years that we've been doing this. In the last 2 weeks, the number of projects that are now private projects that are intended for staff to work on, as everything that's coming online, and there's a lot of it right now, is looking for ways to take staff who have very physical in-person jobs, digitizing material, or even student workers at universities that are shelving books, and be able to get those people their hours and still be able to pay them by giving them options to work from home. So Iowa State actually is one of the biggest pushes on this, because they've got like 200 student workers that they're trying to keep engaged, I guess, or keep able to work on things. But we've seen it with a lot of our existing and with new clients. Just anything else to add?
I mean, the main focus that many of them have are ways to both keep projects interesting. So there are some projects that are started as an option for remote work, because transcription is, for some people, less drudgery than the other options that they have of metadata cleanup and such. The other focuses are ways to try to make sure that the data is reusable, that the transcripts are all completed, so that we don't have 50 different projects that are each 5% done. Those are most of the concerns and worries right now that we're hearing.
But yeah, folks that are using, that have digital asset management systems that are IIIF enabled are, it's really, really fast.
IIIF has made this really, really straightforward for a lot of institutions.
And I will second that on the pedagogical end. Putting the IIIF into FromThePage is easy peasy.
This is
Hi,
great. All
this is
these.
Stu.
Yeah, go ahead, Stu.
Yeah. Thanks for the presentations. And I'm in particular kind of interested in the pedagogical and instructional context of examples in which institutions, as we get to more remote, this kind of tooling becomes that much more interesting as faculty are trying to find ways to engage their students other than Zoom, and some of the more conventional options. If folks at other institutions have examples, or those of you who've been involved in this, of kind of advocating for this kind of work, or showcasing this kind of work at your institutions to introduce it to instructors and faculty who may not be kind of aware of the possibilities. So this is kind of more at the institutional level. We've always had this challenge of explaining IIIF and kind of making people aware of all the amazing possibilities and tools. If there are specific examples at institutions of starting to kind of promote this kind of work to new faculty or instructors. Or not.
Well, as someone who works at a lot of different institutions, every time I come in and do a project, and then I show it to the folks who are working there, they're like, "This is fantastic." So it wouldn't be a terrible thing to reach out to adjunct instructors who are teaching on multiple campuses. Just a thought.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in and add that I think showing it to people is what makes it important. People, once they see it, they then understand it. Or if they don't understand it, they know the potential. They go, oh, this is really, really interesting. This is something that I can use. The reason why the education department at Huntington brought me on board was because I had shown it to them. I had said, hey, take a look at this tool. Look at how this could be used. And they went off and ran with it. They were like, oh, can you show us how I can compare X, Y, and Z? And once I did that, then they started doing it on their own. So I think a lot of this is really just straight up demonstration of the potential of the tools, and sort of building a case for it in your institution.
And Stu, I'll just add on the IIIF side, something like literally it's something as simple as like recording this and making it more easily available so that you could point to a snippet of this. Like we're going to post this on YouTube, basically on our IIIF YouTube channel, which I'll put in the chat here. But like we have a little more bandwidth now. We're very happy to have Meg join us as a new staffer. And so I think we're going to try and be more diligent about putting examples that seem to really speak to useful use cases, putting things like this on YouTube just so that people can point to it and hopefully say to others, say like, hey, here's a visual way of just seeing how this can be so useful. Other responses to that or other questions for any of the folks here today?
I was wondering if, this is Tina, by the way. I was wondering, we're starting to think about and work on visual descriptions for our artwork images at the museum, and wondering if the tool has ever been used for things like that. Especially for if it could be crowdsourced, like having an image and multiple people being able to describe it and add it to a database.
So for descriptions of visual resources, what our tool is good at is creating text that's based on them. So that would work well for things like captions, we believe. We can also set up fields for cataloging metadata about things like where a picture was taken, those kinds of things. There are other tools like Madoc, produced by Digerati, that do a great job of doing things like Facebook style identifying people in photos, that kind of tagging kind of metadata. So there are other IIIF-based platforms out there that do a great job at this kind of visual work as well.
Great, thank you.
And I'll mention too, even though maybe, I don't know, in my role I shouldn't, but I think it's Zooniverse, I think is like it's not IIIF compliant, although we'd love for them to use IIIF, and I know we've talked to them and they're interested, but I think people have like that kind of tooling is set up to do a lot of those kind of like shorter, quick examples of it sounds like what you're describing of descriptive text for images.
Great.
Other questions, thoughts, comments? Or I should use a pedagogical trick I learned in teaching my class at Pratt. You're supposed to ask, what questions do you have? Which implies the existence of questions. Okay. Well, in that case, maybe with the last 5 minutes here, and if there are questions, please break in, but I will put another link, or I linked to this once before in the chat, but on this topic, we've put together this, this document, this openly editable Google Doc that we're calling, oh wait, I may have just posted the, sorry, I may have just posted the notes document. I think this is the right one. So this resources for working with IIIF materials, and with this document, so there are a lot of IIIF resources out there and a lot of ways to pull them together. Our intent for this document was really geared toward this kind of educational teaching and learning context. So really, as I mentioned, pointing to institutions and collections that make it pretty straightforward to work with the materials in a comparative context. Other tools, like cropping tools or other creation tools that work, kind of with like copy and paste into those tooling elements, pointers to resources and other, like, I think the next hour after this, there's an RBMS, Rare Books and Manuscript section, I think, of ALA. They're doing kind of a similar pedagogical training event online. So, this is geared toward IIIF, but we want to make it as useful as possible. So to the extent that there are other pointers and resources on there, we're really eager to have folks both contribute to it and tell us if there are other things that you'd love to see in there. So you can email us at staff@IIIF.io if you have suggestions, or take a crack at it right in the document itself. And maybe one other thing I'll mention is, I said it at the very top of the hour, but I think, it seems like there's a lot of interest here. There's a lot of folks joining us, which is great. We'll make the recording available, but if you either want to volunteer or have suggestions for another iteration of a call like this in 2 weeks' time, please get in touch with us. We want to make this useful and responsive to what is useful to you. So just let us know, and we'll work with the folks that we know in the community to find good demos and calls for presentations. So that's about what I have. That brings us pretty close to the top of the hour. Any last questions or comments that anybody wants to lodge here?
No, but thank you very much.
Great. Well, thank you, to Laura, Mario, the Brumfields. Really appreciate kind of the ability to present on this pretty quickly. We threw it together, and I'm grateful for your effort in doing that. And thank you all for joining us. We'll put the recording in the notes doc, and have a great Wednesday. Please stay safe and take care. Cheers all.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.